Hi, welcome back to our second segment of Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans.
And I'm Robert Winters.
Here we go.
And as we were speaking before the break, I was mentioning that there were a couple of these city council committee meetings that took place over the last couple, since our last show.
Yes.
One was on Thursday, August 25th. The other
Right.
was on Monday, August 29th. And these were both meetings in part of the neighborhood.
It's a long one to say.
The long one, neighborhood and long-term planning, public
facilities, arts and celebration committee.
That was they and the civic unity committee for the first one.
Okay.
And then it was that same long-winded committee name,
Yeah.
supposedly in the government operations committee for the second one, but in fact it was not involving the government operations committee,
So
which
is that just a fluke or?
I don't know, but I actually consider it to be very problematic for those of you who are into this esoterica, because since both of these meetings were all about elections,
Yeah.
and arguably the neighborhood and long-term planning, public facilities, arts and celebration committee, none of those names have anything to do with elections.
Yeah, true.
At least if you have a joint committee with a
Yeah.
civic unity, you maybe could make a case. Or if you have a meeting with the government operations, maybe you can make a case. So the second one did not involve government operations. So as far as I'm concerned, the meeting should have been canceled until they could do a proper joint meeting. The council order that set the meeting up specifically stated this will be a joint meeting. And the chair
happen.
of neighborhood long-term planning just scheduled it anyway, so.
Well, we don't know all. Maybe something else happened. We don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, the
been
government
figured
operations
out.
committee, the
They're
big item on the
busy
table
now. Is the
is,
city
well, they
manager?
are and they aren't, because the
Oh.
government operations committee pretty much set up the process for the search, just to run off on a little bit of a
Yeah.
tangent.
Okay.
The search process for the next city manager, and once formed, there are 4 city councilors on this screening committee right
Right.
now, and I think 15 others.
That
They
they
met to,
Appointed, right?
right, so they've had one meeting, they're gonna meet again on the September 12th and 13th.
It's Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, next week. And then in theory, what should emerge from that will be a finalists list of
And then
maybe
that
3
goes to the
candidates for
government
city
operations
manager.
committee, or do they
Well,
attend all those?
Actually, I'm not sure if that goes back to the government operations committee or directly to the city council.
Okay.
But the point is that the government operations committee actually has not been directly involved. The committee's doing the screening,
Okay.
right? So who knows?
Especially appointed committee,
Yeah, specially appointed
Okay.
committee, right?
which
So
involves counselors and citizens.
there,
and
yeah,
other
they can be
people.
at
Okay.
most 4 city councilors.
And they're gonna report to the entire city council.
In principle, they're supposed to basically give, I think it's maybe 3 names, and then the
Yeah.
council has to take a
That's-
vote.
I mean, they're supposed to decide it, but what, the
They have-
26th? Or is that when
in-
Rossi's leaving?
Richie
that'd be
Richie
soon.
Rossi's contract goes till September 30th. If they have not made a decision by then, Richie's intention is not to continue, but then one of the assistant city managers will then have to be appointed to continue, unless Richie has a change of heart. On the other hand, maybe they'll make a decision on September
Right.
26th. It's a very real possibility.
So is it rare that the city manager stays to break in the other one, or is that more of the job of the assistant deputy? I mean, in the past? Well, no, it's hard to know, because Rossi was the.
Well, right, and the other
And he
guy-
took it over, so
and he was
didn't
preceded
need
by
to-
Bob Healy, who was in there for over 30 years. So it's
Who took over from, no.
he was
Yeah, so who knows, you're right.
say was city manager. I'm ashamed. I'm forgetting his.
Whatever.
I'm
So the
spacing
point
out his
is-
name. But we just don't have a lot of
Yeah.
precedent to.
Plus,
to
having
quote.
someone like Lisa Peterson, who is I mean, she could
Right,
certainly break
so the
somebody
deputy
in,
city
yeah.
manager could stand in for a while, the commissioner of
Right.
public works could stand in, the head of human services programs, El
So
Seminole could
anybody that's a
stand
head
in.
of a department could
Yeah,
theoretically stand
yeah,
in.
the council can't just hire Joe Schmo off the street. They
Okay.
have to, it has to be,
Okay.
to be consistent with the charter, has to be a kind of a major figure. So that's in principle what would happen. Then again, maybe Richie will say, okay, I'll give you another couple of weeks, whatever.
Yeah.
But that he certainly expressed an interest in not doing
Right.
another extension. So, and actually at the baseball game, watching him hanging out with his grandkids, I was thinking like,
Yeah. Yeah.
take off, Rich. So
Yeah,
you've been a great guy, and it's go enjoy your retirement. So anyway, that was the first meeting of this one had to do with this idea about voter rewards. Now, one thing that was kind of infuriating about this meeting was that there was a description of what it was supposed to be to receive feedback from the community. Then as soon as I got there, because I was going to go to the baseball game, so I wasn't going to stay, I just wanted to speak my piece, so I got there early, so I signed up early.
Yeah.
And then I see the agenda, and they stuck public comment only for the last half hour of a 2-hour meeting, which was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I protested, and people yielded, and I was able to speak, and several other people spoke at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
And it actually became pretty clear that this notion about voter rewards, which some of us have basically characterized as bribing voters to vote in municipal elections rather than convincing them to vote, it really is falling pretty flat. I don't think there was much of any support other than by this little gathering of this one city councilor who's sort of doing it like a little class project. Other than that, I think it goes nowhere. But I didn't stay for the meeting because I had better things to do. So anyway, that was the first of these. We had to go play ball. The second one
was
the meeting
past a week ago, Monday.
Yeah, on the August 29th, it was supposed to be a joint meeting to discuss different models for campaign finance reform, and there had been a proposal earlier this year for publicly funded municipal elections in Cambridge. Right. Again, this meeting was also advertised as being there primarily to receive feedback from the community, but it was largely dominated by presentations by
So was there public comment
self-appointed
at all?
experts. There was public comment.
Beginning or at the end?
I think it was later, and I didn't need to rush off, so I just stuck around.
Yeah.
There weren't too, I mean, basically the people who were there, it's sort of like you invite the people who are on your side.
Right.
And then, most people basically didn't really care about this, so maybe 3 or 4 of us others showed
Really?
up.
What about how many city councilors were there?
Don't remember.
I mean, enough?
There
Half?
were, actually I do remember, I think there were 4.
That's all?
There were 4.
Are they on that committee?
Yeah, they would
Oh.
have to be on that committee.
And Mark probably was there.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I think it was Carlone, Devereaux, Mazin, McGovern. I don't know if anybody else was
So
there.
Mayor Simmons wasn't there?
She's not on that committee.
Okay.
Right. If the Government Operations Committee had been there, David Marr would have to have been there.
And
But
okay.
yeah, it's because he's chair
All
of
right.
that committee.
So what, was it just to that?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it was about municipal, different models for campaign finance reform, right? And not surprisingly, since most of the people who were there were part of the group who were advocating for doing this, so they sort of all spoke up about what a wonderful thing it would be to use tax money to do all this and that.
They actually use that word? Tax money? City money?
I think they don't. They always say publicly funded elections.
But that.
Which is
the
actually.
City, is that, but that means that the city pays for it, right? Publicly funded?
Yeah.
Or it could be the public.
Well, here's the thing that's kind of funny about it. Actually, it was Election Commissioner Polly Cobb made a rather brilliant observation. She said, well, all elections are publicly funded.
True.
She said, what you're really proposing, Counselor, is publicly funded campaigns.
Ah.
See, the city, of course, conducts the elections. They don't run the campaigns. This is actually publicly funded campaigns.
Why didn't I even think of that?
Why didn't I think
Why
of it?
didn't you think of it?
So
it's not about funded elections.
was wearing a hat, I would tip my cap
it's
to
like in the
Polly Cobb.
federal you write off if you want to donate $1 for publicly, and most candidates don't take that money because they can't.
There are usually strings
enough.
attached. That's right. It puts limitations on you.
What a smart thing that she said.
I thought it was brilliant, actually.
So public finance campaigns.
It's really about publicly financed campaigns.
But,
So I did speak. I'll just mention a few of the highlights. I won't go into great detail.
Yeah.
But my first observation was that the problem really, basically the proposal is basically to generate even more money to pay for campaigns, whereas in my opinion, the problem is
it's too much money.
For local campaigns, there's like a race to outspend each other.
It's crazy.
And the problem is not so much the lack of funds, but the fact that they're spending too much.
Yeah, and some people are going into probably debt to try to fund their own campaign.
Yeah, and the numbers have been just reaching and reaching sky high. it is sort of ironic that one of the biggest campaign spenders was the person who's proposing the publicly funded ones too.
Okay.
But let's not worry about
What
that
was
too
the
much.
highest amount in the last election?
It was
80,000?
high 80s, might have broke 90. Yeah, and actually one of the biggest raisers and spenders didn't win. So the notion that and he was an incumbent.
Right.
So the notion that there's a lockstep correlation here between money spent and raised and your ability to win is not at all borne out. In fact, as I've pointed out many times in the past, Craig Kelly in the past, not so much this last election, but he would raise little, spend little, and then he would win. And you know, his per dollar expenditure was like a fraction of all the other candidates. So to me, this notion that somehow we need to generate even more money for candidates doesn't really add up. And I said so. And I said the real problem is you people spend too much.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
But wait a minute, but don't they mean if it was publicly funded, do they mean only publicly funded and you cannot raise money?
You know, the thing is that different models that you could do.
But what model was proposed here? Wasn't clear?
I think there were 3 people who were there, and I think different people were saying different things.
Okay, because that then would level the playing field if it only came from the public, which
I think is that you
anything.
can't do that, though. I mean, the thing is...
I think the public has to agree to that.
Even if they did,
dollars,
the courts wouldn't.
Okay.
Well, the thing is that you can agree, like under clean elections laws that were once proposed but no longer in Massachusetts.
Right.
You basically say, if I agree to take public money, then I'm limited so I'm not raising more than some token amount.
Right.
And then other candidates will say, and in fact, I think in presidential elections,
they have a choice.
They have a choice. They say, well, I'm going to forego that because I think my chances are better if I don't do it that way. That's right. So anyway, there's a discussion that's worth having, to be sure. But what I suggested very much at this meeting was that instead there should be a voluntary cap on spending. We've mentioned that on the show before. So it's not mandatory. But voluntary. But if the word goes out very clearly that we are expecting, and again, what should the cap be, right?
Right. You have some
I'm just,
here that you suggested.
Just ballpark
I think you're pretty
estimates.
generous.
I'm very generous on this. If you actually look, rarely does a school committee campaign go beyond 15,000. So how about it be 15,000?
Okay.
Rarely does a city council campaign go beyond 50,000. In fact, that's actually kind of on the high side, as you say.
It is. Yeah.
Right? So why not let's just say that's the voluntary cap and challenge all the candidates to meet it. And if they fail to, quite honestly,
it would be a failure if it's voluntary. It's just that it's...
You shame them.
You would be...
Right, okay. But the thing is, if they wanted to, they say, sorry, excuse please, got to raise more money, spend more money, then they could do it, but everybody would know.
But you also say something about where the money comes from.
Yeah, well, there's one thing I didn't say at the meeting, but I'll say now, one suggestion was that, and this really would be publicly funded campaigns, is you set aside a month, so everybody who's planning to be a municipal candidate, they say, okay, you better declare yourself by such and such a date, and then we'll set up, who we is, we'll figure that out, but we'll set up a simple vehicle, kind of the way Act Blue works for funding campaigns, where in fact we challenge everybody in the city. They say, these are the candidates who are seeking money. Here's a simple way to do that. Candidates, stretch your stuff and see if you can draw some money here and do that. And we sort of help them raise some money from the public, right?
Yeah. Right? I don't like that, but anyway, that's me.
Yeah.
I like the other one though, that the donations should be half of them from Cambridge.
Yeah, well, the other thing is that and sometimes it's because people are taking money from developers, evil developers that may be from Cleveland or wherever, and sometimes it's because people are just getting money from... Their relative
lives somewhere else, but they used to live here, or
and I think
niece or nephew.
Well, that's why saying that you can only get money from Cambridge residents is ludicrous.
No.
If your son, daughter, mother, father live in New York or California, then there's nothing wrong with getting some money from your friends and relatives.
Right.
But the thing is that when you start getting to the point where more than half of your funds are coming from places that have nothing to do with Cambridge, I think that's a problem.
But that should probably also be a voluntary thing.
I would say so. So what I suggested that there should be voluntary limits on the percentage of political contributions from non-residents. And interestingly, and I actually pointed to two counselors who were, I mean, it was interesting. Two of the three counselors who had the highest percentage of their campaign came from Cambridge residents were there at the meeting. Councilors Devereaux and Carlone. Right. I think Minka Van Buzikum was another one, a high roller. Craig Kelly was a rather high roller, maybe one or two others. And the person with the lowest fraction was Councilor Mazin, who was it was less than 20% of his money came from Cambridge residents.
Dennis Benzing?
I don't remember.
Because you said he raised a lot?
Honestly, there were a lot of them in that sort of 40, 50-ish range here.
Okay.
So I just suggested, just out of the top of my head, said let's make it be, you got to get at least half. So at least 50% of your funds have to come from Cambridge residents. As voluntary cap, if you want to go over it, fine, but then we sort of tell the world that, you know, you're getting your money from elsewhere. So anyway, those are some of the ideas that I've floated. Another thing I did, which was actually several of the city officials came up to me later and said, gee, I never thought about that. Was that all of the people who were proponents of these publicly funded campaign schemes were basically using as examples things that were essentially like single winner elections, like electing a mayor and there are three candidates and how do you get more candidates. There's no ranked choice ballots, no proportionally elected legislature. There are no slates of candidates. And I made the case, I think a pretty good case, that in fact when you're in a situation where you're going to be a candidate could receive public funds just by being a candidate and meeting some minimal requirement, like, you know, let's say it was, just to make some number up, let's say you have to get at least 50 contributions of $10 or more.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of typical of the requirements, right? So that, you know, that's not a lot of money. It's, you know, $500. And I said, well, you know, a person who wanted to could basically put together a slate, even if the whole purpose of the slate was to elect one or two people, and just basically recruit a total of maybe 20 people and have them each get $500 through $10 donations from the same group of 50 people. So that's actually $200 a person for those individuals. So that's not a lot. And then they could basically then qualify for public funding for 20 candidates. They'd all get city money, taxpayer money. And they'd all basically be going, yeah, for the slate, even though they're really just pooling it all to elect two. So I said, so until you guys can figure out some of those realities, then I think maybe this conversation needs to be put on hold. So anyway, that was speaking my piece at that.
Any other public comments that were interesting?
Honestly, the not that many people came out to the meeting, and most of them were part of this little Boy Scout troop that was putting together.
You're being very.
I'm sorry, but it was a naive group of people who gave themselves some fancy name. I forget what they called themselves, but you know, honestly, they just didn't have a lot to offer. They really didn't. It was a absolute amateur hour. Anyway, it was an interesting meeting nonetheless. You know, another thing too, which is, and I think this is actually a pretty serious question, is in all of these discussions or proposals about public funding for elections, there's an implication that anybody who takes money from a property owner or a business owner is somehow accepting the money as some sort of a quid pro quo, pay-to-play thing, which honestly, I haven't seen it, but there is this nagging suggestion that's always being made.
It's not pure.
And you know, my feeling about it is that if you have somebody who's giving you money because you promise to be pro-development, that's not a whole lot different than somebody giving you money to promise you to be anti-development.
Right.
It's just
they're supporting a cause. They're not determine. It's just that this is the candidate that matches your
Yeah.
views, so I'll give money.
Exactly, and to me, that's
It all has to
basically.
be declared. They can't. It's not. It's not dark money.
Honestly,
right?
that's the
Yeah.
real thing. Is
Yeah.
that what offends me in elections and campaign finance is not strictly the amount of money that people raise and spend so much as long as it's all disclosed.
Right.
You know, I find it infuriating that money that's coming from mystery sources are used to influence elections. But that
Not
citizen,
Cambridge.
well,
Well, what do you mean mystery? Don't they? You said it has to be disclosed.
well, I mean, we just mentioning
Oh.
before about in these the Pat Jalen Leland Chung race how
the Democratic.
there's some suggestion of quote dark money
Yeah.
coming in to support that campaign, and there's another one even is the suggestion that the one organization was supporting Mike Connolly in the Toomey
Yeah.
Connolly race.
So in other words, a super PAC type thing where they do not have to declare their members.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
the difference. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
All right.
when I see one of the joys
Yeah.
of living in Massachusetts in a presidential race is that
Yeah.
the presidential candidates are not running here because they know the Democrats are going to win.
Yeah.
But we get inundated by these ads for Maggie Hassan and
Kelly Ayotte.
Kelly Ayotte for New
You
Hampshire.
see her latest one where she's in a baseball. She's getting.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's great.
I
It's
thought it was
actually
great.
well done. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I was in New Hampshire, I'd say, "Oh, I'm gonna vote for her. She can hit a softball.
Yeah,
It's great."
right.
But the but if you look at it, almost all of these ads, some are said paid for these.
Yeah.
I support
Yeah.
this message, but many of them are from like Granite State Solutions and all these made up names where there's no disclosure at
That's all
all.
because Citizens United.
It's all because of Citizens United, and and I got to tell you, I don't get as hot and bothered about Citizens United as some people. I actually do agree that money is speech in many ways, and curtailing your ability to raise and spend money
Yeah, but
is
they're
some
not.
restriction.
But it should be disclosed. Who's giving the
That's
money?
the thing.
Okay.
Like, so if you want to spend $1 gazillion to buy an election,
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
But we wanna know
but
who
I want to
you
know,
are. Right.
whether it was the evil Koch brothers or some
The
other
hedge fund,
entity.
who is it?
Or
Right,
basically, are you just a shill for labor unions or whatever?
Right.
To me, I just think everybody should know,
Right.
and that gives your opponent the right to make it an issue too.
Thinking of that, somebody could actually give a lot of money to a person who lives in Cambridge, who then writes the check to a candidate, and it could be a large amount, and because there's no limit on what.
I think there are
we have limits in the
would
city
be
election?
I believe that would be considered illegal.
But how would we know?
You wouldn't be able to track it.
Right, they gave them a cat. And they get right out a check. But
Well,
is there a limit? Is there a limit though on city
I'll give
elections?
an example. What happens? It's standard practice now. Is that some big company wants to support a candidate.
Yeah.
So what they do is miraculously you see $500 nowadays it'll be $1,000 checks.
Yeah.
Being written by everybody in the family members, friends, relatives, or whatever, so that in fact there's actually a even if the limit was $500, which it was prior to last year, you might get $3,500, $4,000 in contributions.
Because it's all this.
And the suggestion is it was really all coming from the same source, but it all got kind of filtered through multiple.
So it's really hard to control all that. Yeah.
It is hard to control, but
wait, 500 was the individual. Is that a city thing?
That was state, I believe.
Because I know that national is 2,700, right?
Right. So, but in the city, throughout the Massachusetts, it was a $500 limit, and that applied to city council races as well.
Oh, it does. See, I didn't know that.
And that last year was up to 1,000, and that really,
that wasn't
did
good.
matter. And I was
no wonder there's so much money now.
The pre-primary reports were due, I think, a week or something ago, and I was looking at the campaign finance reports for some of our contested local elections.
You mean now?
Yeah, currently, the ones that are happening on Thursday, and you could see some of these big high roller $1,000 contributions.
Really?
So it's not, some people are getting their $10 and $15 and $20 contributions, but it's still money talks, and there are some very prominent names. In fact, in some cases, the kind of people who, speak out about the evil influence of money in politics. But when their favorite candidate is running, there's a $1,000 check from the same person.
Will you have those amounts by next week?
I have them now. I haven't publicized them.
But there's still money coming in, don't you think?
The way it works is they won't be in that report, but then there are these late contribution reports you are required to file.
So you have them now. You know how much is being spent or how much has been raised in each of these campaigns.
In terms of the ones that the campaigns are showing, which does not include some of this dark money,
Yeah.
At least not yet, because maybe that's all
Right.
spent after the deadline. See, that's the thing about when you look at these campaign finance reports.
I would suspect
Sometimes
it would be.
the bills
Yeah.
only get paid after the election's over.
Right.
So you actually have to look back retroactively and summarize and say,
Right.
who spent a fortune to buy an election, and
Right.
you won't know it from the pre-primary
Right.
reports.
Have you seen any online web presence for these candidates? Because I don't.
They-
Again, they're not
they're-
my candidates, so I don't.
They're all using that. Everybody's hiring
Facebook?
consultants
Oh.
who are marketing through social media of all
Okay.
sorts. Their candidates, actually, Tim Toomey has a rather impressive social
Well, they all have
media
their own
presence.
websites too.
Well, you can see in the campaign finance reports that he spent
Okay.
some serious money to
On
somebody
getting,
to coordinate
oh,
that.
Good for him.
I mean, it's interesting to actually watch. You can
Yeah.
actually see where the money's being spent.
Okay.
At least
Wow.
for the expenses up till now. There's a lot of money being dumped on individuals for his campaign management, campaign staff.
Where do you see these figures?
They're at the Office of Campaign and Political Finance.
You have to physically go there?
Nope, they're all
It's
online. Yeah.
Office of the,
OCPF. Yeah,
it's a state office.
it's all under the Secretary of State.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's interesting. I have to say though, that in terms of the two competitive local races,
Yeah.
just looking at those numbers, other than seeing a few names and you go, oh, I see who's with whom, whatever, they really weren't that telling. They were both paying, so far, spending kind
About
of,
the same amounts.
yeah, comparable amounts, and not too shocking for a
Yeah.
very competitive election.
Right, it is a state
There'll be
election.
the numbers, I think, for the post-primary reports, which I think come up before November election, or pre-general election reports. Maybe that's a better way to say that. Those will be much higher numbers, I'm sure.
So once that primary is over, neither of those seats have any real challenge by Republicans?
It's ludicrous that we live in
Yeah.
a state where, in fact,
I know.
everything gets settled in a Thursday in September,
Yeah.
and then in November the voters basically have no choice at all. I think the parties like it that way because they get to control things,
Yeah,
but I think it's actually a pretty dreadful reality.
well.
We could do a lot better. So, anyway, we're down to our last few
Here we
seconds.
are.
So,
So next week will be interesting because you will have attended and I will try to watch the first city council meeting of
that's it. Next Monday. Bye.
Bye.